Now, when I said the thing about proof in the beginning, this is the thing. No matter what image you show, people will come by and say, this is the debunkers. I call them the cockroach debunkers because they come out of the woodwork like as soon as you show any image, they'll say, that was a glitch. That was a smudge. Oh, that was Photoshop. That was this, that was that. So they're going to try to debunk anything, but they can't debunk it if you tell people not this is the one photo you must believe, but you tell them how to do it themselves. And then they can debunk somebody's photo, but they can't debunk you when you took the photo and you know what you did to take the photo.
Chris Lado, welcome to Lado Files.
Welcome to Lado Files. I'm here with Dr. Courtney Brown. This is his video playing in the background you can see on Instagram. Dr. Brown is the founder of the Farsight Institute. He's known for his work in the field of remote viewing. It's a type of extrasensory perception. His primary research interest lies in sociophysics, a discipline that combines mathematics, social science, physics, and the study of consciousness. Brown has a deep interest in quantum mechanics, cosmology, and the connections between consciousness and the universe. He's authored books on remote viewing and has a personal interest in exploring spirituality and extraterrestrial life through this method. Brown is also a pilot and enjoys making video documentaries. Courtney Brown, thanks for being here.
Yeah. I'm very pleased to be here, Chris. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, we were chatting just before, but I just found out about your work. I'm very happy to find out about it. And like I just said, you have many more interests than just capturing these videos. But for the interest of getting quality evidence out there, or how to capture it, can you just talk us through really this video, I guess, in particular, and how your team captured it or how you captured it?
Yeah, actually, that's one I shot myself. I'm what I am talking about today, my interest in UFOs, UAPs, and extraterrestrials and remote viewing. I do that outside of my normal work, but normally I'm a professor at Emory University. But there I teach math and stats courses in a social science program. But the basic idea is that in my DNA is the idea that there has to be proof for things. So I know that people want proof. They want proof, proof, proof. And being a mathematician who works in a social science program, uh, proof is the basis of everything that I do with regard to statistics and stuff. So outside of the university, I do this work with remote viewing and with extraterrestrial with videography of the ships. And for a long, long, long time, we knew that we'd actually have to offer some way to have proof that the extraterrestrials exist. And that had to be, and I use the word proof fully aware that proof means absolute certainty. And that only came about because in 2022, Panasonic came out with a new camera, and that's the GH6. And the GH6 allows us to shoot at 120 frames per second. And we have these cameras modified so that they shoot in infrared. Now, the picture that you're seeing right now, that's 4 Blue Angels jets over the Pensacola Naval Air Station. And that was taken on May 2nd, 2023. And there's a UFO that's like passing right by it. The guy who told us how to do all this, I'm not the genius that figured this all out. The guy who told us how to do all this was Lincoln Lounsbury, and he has for a great many years. He's now retired, but for a great many years he was a senior air traffic control person at the Washington D.C. airport, the big one, and that's the most highly controlled airspace on the planet. And he came to us at Farsight in December of 2022 and said, basically, we think you should be doing this. And I said, okay, well, tell us. And we were in our studio, the same studio I'm in now. He brought a PowerPoint presentation. He brought Excel spreadsheets. He brought tons of examples of these UFOs that he was shooting right in Washington, D.C., right over the Capitol. I mean, this is like the most highly controlled airspace in the world. And our jaws dropped. And he said the key is you have to shoot at a high frame rate, and then you have to shoot in infrared. Now you can get some things in visible light, but it's relatively rare compared to what you get with infrared. And then he told us he told us the camera to get the GH6. Now we already were using Panasonic Lumix GH5 cameras. We use GH4 cameras and 5 cameras, but now when for us to be told to get a GH6, that was a natural evolution for us. And he told us the exact company to send it to get it modified so that it could do infrared. So we didn't think this stuff up. He told us, and I'm here. You have the most senior air traffic control person in the Washington D.C. airport, which is the most highly controlled airspace on the planet, coming to our place, and he paid for the airline ticket to get here. The whole thing. We bought him lunch. That was it. But other than that, and he gave us everything, and then so we just followed the instructions, and we started by taking video recordings in January of 2023 right over my house. And these recordings have to be short, like 10 to 20 minutes max, because you're shooting at 120 frames a second. And when you're shooting at 120 frames a second, when you get it in post, when you're editing it, we use Adobe Premiere, you have to slow it way down. So 10 minutes of video footage is hours of footage when you actually are slowing it way down, because you can't see these things, so they're going so fast. And he was the one who, when we started shooting, he was the one who analyzed our footage, a super senior air traffic control person, and told us the speeds. So he said these things are traveling 20,000 plus miles an hour or 32,000 kilometers per hour. He was analyzing everything in terms of other aircraft that were in the locations. He had us using Flight Radar 24 to make sure that record everything with regard to what else is up there.
Mhm.
And like this one that you're looking at right now is a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO, and it passes right by a major airline jet, and it was doing multiple passes. This is like over my house, Chris, and
Mm.
so you have this cigar-shaped thing going 20,000 miles an hour. Chris, it can be the size of the Titanic flying right over your house. You're not going to see it if it's 20,000 miles an hour, 32,000 kilometers an hour. It's just too fast. But shooting at 120 frames a second, you can see it. And this is all shot. What you're looking at right now is infrared. Now, the first thing that you showed me, which was over Pensacola Naval Air Base, that was
Mm.
again with the Panasonic Lumix GH6, and that was in infrared, and that was 120 frames per second. And you can see that UFO is passing the jets. You're the airline, you're the pilot. So I'm assuming those jets are going like 550 miles an hour. And that UFO is clearly 4 or 5 times faster than them. They're almost looking like they're stationary. So you're the one who can estimate the speeds. I mean, it's clear as day. And everything was totally invisible when I did it. Like when I was shooting this thing,
Hmm.
it was nothing. Nothing was in the sky except the Blue Angels jets. There was very little air wind. There were no bugs. There was no wind. There was no dust. It was just Blue Angels jets. And then when I put it in post, when I put it in Adobe Premiere and slowed it way down and applied some, some what we call LUTs, light, which are lookup tables for coloration to get it to pop out better, it was clear as day. My jaw dropped. Now, look, I've been studying UFOs and aliens since the 1990s in terms of formal stuff with remote viewing. So I'm used to this stuff. But when I saw these things right over my house or right over my camper at the Pensacola Naval Air Base, my jaw drops when I analyze the footage. Mind you, my jaw doesn't drop when I'm actually shooting because I can't see anything. It just looks like blue sky. And it's in the middle of the day at an arbitrary time. But typically over 10 to 20 minutes, we can easily find 30 to 40 UFOs right over the house or right over where we are. They're everywhere. Now, they're not completely everywhere. I did test this with the Pensacola Naval Air Station. I went in an afternoon that there was no flight traffic one time and there was nothing going on and I didn't get anything. I went to Kenya for 5 days to do shooting in Africa and I got one UFO, one clear UFO. So they're not every place all the time, but over major cities or they, for some reason, Lincoln Lounsbury, the air traffic control guy, he's the one who told me that they love air shows. I don't know how we knew that they loved air shows, but they love air shows. And why they like air shows, I have no idea. But he said, go down and do an air show. So I said, we took all of his advice so far. So I took the cameras down and did an air show. And I have recordings of literally hundreds and hundreds of UFOs during the air show. They swooped down like it was crazy. But and you saw one picture there with one passing the jet. Anyway, this cigar-shaped one that you're looking at right now, that was over my house in Atlanta, and it's a major airline hub. Atlanta Airport is one of the busiest or the busiest airport on the planet, and that thing just flew right by a jet. And it wasn't just, you see multiple shots here. It wasn't flying once. It flew multiple times over the house. And I caught it a bunch of times. One of those times it flew right by this airline jet that was up there. And again,
And I guess, Courtney, how do you prove that it's not insects? I haven't
well,
seen any footage from this, but is there an easy, dead set way you can prove 100% it's not an
absolutely,
insect?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I make a joke about it, but I make a joke about it that we discovered it, and you can put my name on it, give me a Nobel Prize, and so on. But the joke is that we discovered it, and in doing all of this, we discovered that all birds and bugs have wings. Yes, they have wings, and we also discovered that when they fly, they flap their wings. So what we do is we look at this footage, and then we zoom in post. Now you have to shoot wide because you can't see them. You can't like use your zoom lens and zoom in while they're flying over your head because you can't see anything. So you have to shoot wide angle, but you have to be able to zoom in, which is why you shoot in 4K, because when it's in post and it's on your computer, you put it in Adobe Premiere or whatever editing program you're working with, and you have to zoom in at that time on your while you're editing to be able to see these things, and you have to slow things way down. Well, when you zoom in, one of the things that we always have to do is with any UFO, you have to zoom in really, really, really close to see if there's anything on the sides, if there's any flapping, any type of vibration, any type of anything on the sides is evidence that there's wings. That's one of the things that Lincoln Lounsbury actually looks for, because he's a flight traffic control person. So he zooms in, he looks really closely, and he has to be able to see that there's absolutely no wings of any type. And bugs and birds are really easy because not only do they have their wings, but they flap their wings. So you can actually see them going back and forth. You can actually see them. And sometimes it's really clear. You can actually see the veins inside the wings of the bugs and so on. So it's really very obvious that they're not bugs or birds. The other thing is Lincoln Lounsbury showed us another way to estimate the speed, and he does it for us. We don't do it ourselves. And that's to estimate the speed in terms of body lengths per second. Now, when you're looking at something, and he loves it when, like this one that you're looking at now had some clouds. So he loves looking at that because he can tell the altitude very easily. Because if you have clouds, he knows the types of clouds. Being an air traffic control person, that's what they do. So he looks at the clouds and he knows, and especially if it's under the clouds and it goes through the clouds, he can tell the altitude right away. So the other one that you showed that was over Atlanta, that was under the clouds. So he knew it was under the clouds, and it went through the clouds and into the clouds. So, it's very clear that's not a bug or a bird. And so, in addition, it has no wings. And in addition, in measuring speed two different ways, measuring speed in terms of the actual speed, because there's a reference there that you can actually see the clouds and you see the airline. You can measure speed in terms of kilometers per hour or miles per hour, but he also estimates it in terms of body lengths per second. That means you take the thing that you're looking at and you measure how long it is, how wide or how long the actual object is, and you see how many body lengths it can go in a second. Now it looks like it's going relatively slow here, but that's because I've slowed it way down. If it was at natural speed, 120 frames a second, but playing at natural speed, you don't see anything. You can't even see them. Maybe you can see maybe a one frame that looks like I have a blink or something like that. But once you slow it down, because you're shooting at 120 frames a second, then you see that sort of choppy motion. See the choppy motion for the UFO that you're looking at right now? That's because
Yeah.
it's going frame at a time. And so that way you can see how many body lengths per second. Now, Lincoln Lounsbury actually knows the speed of the fastest bug and the fastest bird in body lengths per second. And there is one bug that can actually go over 200 body lengths per second, about 200 body lengths per second. But these things are going clearly, they're going over 5 to 600 to 700 over that body lengths per second. And no bird or bug can fly that many body lengths per second.
Hmm,
So that's the
I like
other
that.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great way.
Yeah, so measuring the object in terms of body lengths per second, you really can say, well, there's clearly not anything natural because the very fastest bird or the very fastest bug that exists on the planet Earth, they can measure the speed in terms of body lengths per second. But in addition, they all have wings. And look, you can look at that thing. Does it have wings? It doesn't have wings.
No.
And also Lincoln Lounsbury, he points out it not only doesn't have wings, it doesn't have any type of visible means of propulsion. There's no jet engines and there's no exhaust. With jets, you see the engines in the back, and that has to have wings. So none of that is there. And it's going at a speed that's way faster than a bird or a bug can do, measured any which way you want. But the bottom line is that when it comes to body lengths per second, that's not even slightly controversial, because even if you say it's an open sky, but you see that one that was below the clouds, so he knows the altitude. And with one of those shots we showed him, he looked at the footage. It was more than what I have up on Instagram. He looked where it finally went up, up, up. You see how it's getting shorter as it's going? As you look at it, and
It's
one of the
getting
shots,
further away. Yeah.
yeah, it's getting shorter. That means it's going up.
Mm.
So that's how you tell what altitude it's traveling in. You see, it's longer now, and as it goes on, it's getting shorter. That means it's going up towards the clouds. And all this stuff is not me. I'm a pilot, but I'm not a pilot. I don't fly. I'll tell you, Chris, there's an issue about being a pilot. Um, you have to be current. You have to be current. If you're flying something, even a Cessna, you have to be current. Otherwise, you're going to kill somebody. You're going to kill yourself or kill somebody. You don't just jump into the airplane after 2 or 3 years and just say, "Great, I'm going up." So I don't fly anymore. I have a license, but I don't fly anymore. You were flying daily for years, and so you were always current. I'm current on motorcycles, but I'm not current on aircraft, so I don't fly anymore. So yes, I have a pilot's license. I'm a pilot. I know something about it. But if you ever see me in the cockpit flying an airplane, get off the jet or get off the plane. So-
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, I mean, those are amazing captures, Courtney. What do you think? Like people in the audience, do they have to have a GH6 camera?
No, Lincoln Lounsbury was really emphasizing this, that you can get stuff that's workable if you just want to do it yourself. Um, he had an iPhone, so he was using an iPhone, but it works with an Android just as easily. And what it is let me see. He actually brought one. He brought these things with him. They
Yeah.
have these 3D glasses that you use in the movie theaters, one red and one blue, and you cut them apart so the both are on the same, and you staple them together, the red and the blue together. Now, if you're looking at this right now, it looks like it's almost black. Almost nothing comes through. So visible light with the blue and the red together is almost completely blocked out. So what happens is there's very little ultraviolet in the sky, but there's a lot of infrared. So the blue would influence the ultraviolet, but the red would be with regard to the infrared. So what happens is the almost black color here blocks out almost all visible light, but the red of this filter here, only half of the filter is anything that would influence infrared. So much more infrared is going to be coming through than visible light, because the red is going to let all the infrared in. So what happens is you tape this on top of the lens of the camera. So you have the camera here, and he was putting this on here, and he made a makeshift infrared filter on top
Wow.
of this. Now, cameras, and all cameras, including cell phone cameras, have an infrared filter on them because you normally don't want infrared or ultraviolet, and they have it on the sensor. They don't want infrared or ultraviolet on your pictures because it would fog up the pictures. However, when you put this on top of the lens, nothing's coming through, and then the automatic gain control of the camera on the cell phone goes bonkers. Like you can't see anything because it's black. And so it just ramps up everything. And what happens is the only thing that it can get is the infrared because it blocks out all visible light. And so he found out that he was able to increase the number of UFO captures a lot, not a little, if you did that infrared. And doing that with a cell phone made it accessible to basically anybody. Now let me say, you're not going to get the same quality that you get with the GH6. Those pictures that you just saw were from a GH6. You're going to get higher resolution. I mean, the cell phones do capture in 4K, but the sensors are smaller, and so on. So, but it still works. You can still get something. Now, when I said the thing about proof in the beginning, this is the thing. No matter what image you show, people will come by and say, "This is the debunkers." I call them the cockroach debunkers because they come out of the woodwork like as soon as you show any image, they'll say, "Ah, that was a glitch. Ah, that was a smudge. Oh, that was Photoshop. That was this. That was that." So they're going to try to debunk anything, but they can't debunk it if you tell people not this is the one photo you must believe, but you tell them how to do it themselves. And then they can debunk somebody's photo, but they can't debunk you when you took the photo and you know what you did to take the photo or the video.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to encourage is for a cottage industry to form of people taking their own videos. Now, those people who have enough money to buy a good camera, they can buy a GH6 and get it converted at life.com. Life Pixel is where Lincoln Lounsbury told us to send our cameras. What they do is they take the sensor of the camera and they remove the filter from on top of the sensor that blocks out infrared and ultraviolet. Now, what we liked about Life Pixel is that they don't put any type of protective glass on top of it. Some other camera conversion companies, they take the filter off, but on top of the sensor, they put a protective piece of glass that's supposed to be optically neutral, but we didn't want to deal with anything. We wanted it naked. And so it takes the glass off of the sensor and that's it. So when you want to use the camera again for like regular normal stuff, you have to put a filter on the lens, on the outside of the lens. Now, but that also allows us, since it's a full spectrum camera at that point, it can capture infrared, ultraviolet, and so on. You get to choose the filter you're going to put on the lens. And that allows you to dial in the frequency that you're looking for. And that's measured in nanometers. So we have been using a filter that's in the 830 nanometer band. That's pretty much a deep black. If you were to look at that, it looks black. You're saying you're putting that on top of your lens, you're not going to get anything, and that's correct. Except it's letting in infrared. So we've been using 830. We also have been experimenting with one that is a little bit closer to the visible light spectrum. So it lets in a blend of visible light as well as infrared. And that's more around like the 580 nanometer. But mostly we use the 830 nanometer, which is it looks just black if you're just to hold it up and you're saying. So if some photographer came by and they looked at that, they'd say, "What are you doing? You've got nothing can get through that, because it's just black." But anyway, that's what we've been using. And these pictures that you're looking at right now were taken with the 830 nanometer, and we get these filters from Life Pixel. So after they convert the camera and its full spectrum, we also buy filters from them that we put on top of the lens to dial in what version of nanometer sort of realm in the spectrum that we're actually fine tuning it for. But this also tells you that if you put on different filters, you'll pick up different UFOs. They don't all use the same cloaking tech. But what this has clearly shown is the UFOs are over major cities. I don't know where you live, Chris, but if you're in a major city, that works. You just take your camera. These typically we point them straight up. Now, the one thing you have to be careful about is these are done in the middle of the day. So you have to do it in a way that the sun is not hitting the lens. Otherwise, there'll be a flare on the image and it sort of blocks out everything. What typically is good is if you can do it in the shade of a chimney or a tree. You're still shooting up, but there's always some shade. And the back of my house, I typically put it I wait till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then there's shade on the deck, and I put the camera on a tripod on the deck in the shade of the chimney. And that sort of stops the sun from hitting the surface of the lens. But yeah, it's very possible to do. I was at Indiana University this summer, and I gave a talk about that. I work in my day job in an environment that's extremely resistant to these ideas. The university, the
Yeah.
university people. There's no university on the planet
No
that
thinking, no learning. Yeah.
they don't
No new
allow that.
ideas.
They don't allow this subject to be taught. They don't allow us. Now, here you have congressional hearings with the people like David Grush coming out of the Pentagon, giving congressional hearings, and other people coming forward, whistleblowers talking about this stuff. It's going on the Joe Rogan show. We're talking about it here on your show. Millions and millions and millions of people are watching about this disclosure stuff, and the subject is prohibited from being talked about in academia, in the academy, and universities. There's no courses on it. In fact, I have spoken to many academics who have contacted me and sort of said, "We really admire what you're doing. You're really brave, Courtney. We really think it's really interesting, but I'm not going to do it." They say, I'm not, they always say they're afraid of everything that. Look, I was speaking with David Jacobs. Let me see. Do I have his book here? Yeah, okay. He was the guy who wrote this book, Walking Among Us, and he has a few other books, okay? Now, he was a professor at Temple University, okay? This is Walking Among Us by David M. Jacobs. I was
Wow.
speaking to him on the phone the other day. He was not promoted to full professor. Doesn't matter what he publishes. This is not a criticism of any university, but I've told them numerous academics, and I say, if you're going to do anything like this, do it after tenure. If you do it before tenure, they're going to fire you. And I have
Mm.
known a number of people who got fired because they said, no, it'll be all right. And they fired them right before tenure. So, John Mack at Harvard University. Now, he was founder of his Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning author. He wrote the biography of T.E. Lawrence. I mean, he was no small potato. When he wrote the book Abduction, Harvard tried to get rid of him. He was a full professor. He was tenured. So he not only had tenure, he was promoted to full professor as well. And they tried. There was an academic inquisition for him against him. And I was talking to him on the phone. And at the end of the conversation, he said, "By the way, do you have any uh, deep pocket people, any money people over there that could help me with my legal fees?" He was racking up, tens of thousands, and it later became a few $100,000 of legal fees to try to keep his
Wow.
job at the university, to try to keep his tenure. Finally, Alan Dershowitz wrote some article in the Cambridge local paper saying, "Hey, Harvard is they were trying to get rid of him. There was a faculty inquisition against him." And Alan Dershowitz argued that not only are you violating his tenure, but also his constitutional rights for freedom of speech. And a week later, the dean closed the door on it. The dean said, "Okay, stop it. The argument's over. Uh, John Mack can write whatever he wants. It's okay. He can say whatever he wants. Just stop talking about it. And faculty, just be quiet. Let John Mack do whatever he wants." But it took that much. And to my knowledge, nobody at Harvard ever volunteered to repay him the couple $100,000 of legal fees that he had to incur while he tried to keep his job. So that's the problem. And to this day, even
Wow.
the fact that we have congressional inquiries, there's no academics doing anything. So, and by the way, I don't talk about any of this stuff at my university. I'm a tenured professor at Emory University. I don't. This is not something I talk about because, and there's not a. It's not a criticism at all. It's true of every university, from Harvard, Emory, Duke, Stanford. All of them. It's the exact same situation. So it's not a criticism. The society just wasn't ready for it. So that's what this final step is. Now I've been dealing with remote viewing, and we're the largest, biggest venue of remote viewing projects that exists anywhere. I can say that because we're the only venue that has we have our own streaming service. In fact, publishing this stuff, dealing with remote viewing and also extraterrestrial content became so difficult. We just said we have to have our own venue. So it wasn't just that we had to have our own website. We couldn't. I love YouTube, but we couldn't rely on YouTube anymore. How many people are being bonked off YouTube and going to Rumble these days? So I mean, we couldn't rely on anything. So we had to have our own streaming service. Just like Tucker Carlson now started his own streaming service.
Mm.
So it becomes just too sensitive for this type of stuff. So we have our own streaming service that's really high end on a technical level. It's run by Vimeo. On a technical level, it's equivalent to Hulu, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus, whatever, Max. And it's Farsight Prime, prime.com. And that streaming service, we have like way over 80, 90 projects, full projects with remote viewing, all recorded totally blind, solo, and really very entertaining type of settings. We have a nice studio. We make it really look interesting to watch. But we said, it's still remote viewing. And even though we are the biggest, best venue for remote viewing projects, I can say that because we're the only venue for these remote viewing projects, the public for these large public projects, we still knew that we'd have to deal with the proof issue. People sometimes wouldn't go the remote viewing side of it with the telepathy stuff and everything like that because they didn't believe that remote viewing could be possible because aliens aren't possible in the first place. Now,
Mm.
if you look at some of the disclosure stuff, a lot of the books that have been written about the aliens, about the extraterrestrials, all extraterrestrials when the ships crash and the craft retrieval program is really not in dispute anymore. If you look at the congressional hearings that have been going on about it, that there is such a thing. I mean, you even have people like Senator Marco Rubio and Chuck Schumer saying this is a thing, we have to deal with this. There is such a thing as these are major senators and House of Representatives. These are people that are talking about it openly. So that may not be talked about at the on the academic side of it, but it is being talked about on the political side. And those people are openly talking about it. And one of the things, if you actually go and you actually read all of the stuff about what happens when the ships crash, there's what they call now as non-human biologics.
Yes.
That's otherwise known as aliens. But like that's not in dispute anymore. If you look at these congressional hearings, and you get admirals and generals talking about this, you get especially retired admirals and generals, like just retired. They're saying this stuff has to come out now. So what happens is when you actually have these non-human biologics, otherwise known as extraterrestrials, they talk telepathically, they communicate telepathically, and the military people have to scramble to find somebody that's sort of talented in this regard to be able to
Mm.
communicate with the aliens. And then they typically take the aliens, put them in a room, and XYZ. I don't know how much stuff goes on, but and I'm sure it's not very pleasant for the aliens. But nonetheless, the communications are not in English. They're telepathic. That is the normal means of communicating. So remote viewing and telepathy for extraterrestrials is not a thing. That's not a thing in dispute. And the military people have to scramble to find people that can talk. And they use these people as translators. So the translator will talk to the extraterrestrial, ask questions, and get a response back. And then they have to say it out loud and tell the admirals and generals what's going on. So this is not in dispute. So what we have done at Farsight is to show that this can be done by humans as well, although some training is involved, a considerable amount of training. Our people, which are the best on the planet, they go through a training period of like a year before they can touch any serious projects. It's not easy. If it was easy, no one would have to even question whether remote viewing or telepathy works. It's not easy. And there are reasons for that, which I go through in other settings, but we know why it's not easy also for humanity on this planet. But basically, the issue of proof had to be discussed. And the proof, that's where the cameras came about. So starting this year, in January of 2023, we've been doing this and telling people how to do it. Now we have the proof. Okay, so you don't like my picture. Okay, you're looking at that and you say, I think you did that with Photoshop, Courtney. You did Adobe Premiere, I bet special effects. Courtney, this is called CGI. They can say it's a glitch, it's a bug, it's whatever. It's a bug flying at 20,000 miles an hour without wings. Whatever you want, it's okay. But the point is, now we can say, you don't have to believe us. Don't believe us if you don't want. Why don't you buy a camera? Do it yourself. This is the exact instructions. On our website, farsight.org, we have a link Near the top of the nav bar on the left, a link that you click on it, you get printed instructions for exactly what to do, exact how to edit the stuff in Adobe Premiere. Exactly. All right. So, and now let me go to the thing where it says recording UFOs. There it is. And it says video recording UAPs, UFOs. I clicked on the fifth link down on the nav bar and I got this immediately. And this goes through the instructions, what's the reason for the instructions, why you can't shoot in 1080p and why you can't shoot at 30 frames in a second, why you have to shoot 120, or if you're doing a cell phone, you may be able to get only, or are you using a different type of camera, you may be able to get only 60 frames a second. That can work too. 120 is better, but 60 frames is fine. Um, 30 frames a second, which is normal for American cameras, is not okay. British or European, they're 25 frames a second. That's even worse. So it's got to
Can't some
be,
phones go faster now? Aren't there some phones that go quite fast, S23, etc.?
if you can get 60 frames a second on your phone, that'll be good. If you can get even faster,
Hmm.
120, that's even better. Anyway, if you go down here, you'll see the camera. When we use for the good cameras, we use a Panasonic GH6. We tell the exact place we get it converted. We tell the filters we actually use, the lens we use, and the camera settings. So we go through the camera settings. And so you have to be able. The cameras are complicated in the sense that you have to know what you're going to push on all the buttons to get everything you want. And then we tell what type of video editing sources we have, and we use Adobe Premiere. And then I go through the actual process of editing, and all the UFO stuff that you've had all throughout the decades. It's always the lucky photo that was taken over
Yep.
Brazil, by somebody, and they're
Yep.
wondering what, and controversy then occurs. Now we're getting rid of all of that. They're all over the place, these things, but they're using stealth technology. They know exactly how to make themselves visible, and they know how to make themselves invisible. They're using stealth tech. You can only see them in IR, and there's different configurations. Like there's orbs, there's cigar shapes, there are different types of, and they have these rotating UFOs. There's another Instagram picture I have of a rotating UFO,
Hmm.
and it has like things coming out. And at first you say, "Oh, must be a jet," because it looks like where the tail would be. But then you see those things moving to the front, and then back to the back of it. So you realize, heck, the thing is rotating as it's moving forward. So you get all different types of configurations for these things. And I don't know about you, but I know that there's a lot of people out there that like to go fishing. Would put a worm on the hook and they throw it in there. Hunting for UFOs is like fishing. You never know what you're going to get, and it's a lot of fun. You take the camera out, you set it up, and then you take it home. It's fun.
This
Yeah,
is that
there's a
one, I think, rotating, right?
yeah. Now, and people look at it one still, and they say, "Oh, that's a tail." But then, how can it be a tail? Look, that thing that looks like a tail, but goes to the front of the aircraft, and then goes to the back of the aircraft, and then it goes back to the front of the aircraft, and like you can't do that. So it's obviously like here, it's in the front of the aircraft, and now it's going. And also, this is
With
slowed.
the
Now
back.
it's in the back of the aircraft, so it's clear. And now it's in the middle, and now it's in the front again. So it's clearly It's rotating as it's going forward. And there's something that's up there. By the way, that thing is slowed way down. You see the jerky motion that it's going? That's each frame. So
Each
that was
frame.
shot at 120 frames a second and slowed way down in
And
order
it
for you
has
to
to
be
be
able to see it.
4K, you said?
Yeah,
You said it can't be
because
1080?
you can't zoom in when you're taking the video. You can't use the zoom on the camera to zoom in because you can't
Hmm.
see them. You're blind to them when you're taking when you're shooting these things. You're out there on a nice sunny day and that's it. You don't see anything. You don't see them until you put them in the computer and then put the appropriate LUTs on. That's lookup tables to get the coloration changed to sort of make them pop, and then you slow it way down. And then you have to scrub through the videos in order to see them. You have to go through it slow. It's for 10 minutes of video, you're talking investing a few hours
At
to
4K.
but then you see them. And then
Yes.
you see them clear as day. And obviously they're trying to hide themselves. You can only see them in infrared. By the way, we put multiple cameras. We'd have up to 3 cameras working. and one camera is visible light. Sometimes we use three cameras, and one camera is visible light, and the other two cameras are different IR configurations with different bandwidths, like a 580 and an 830 nanometer. And we see, see the configuration. And in the visible light stuff, you can't see anything. Sometimes they do appear in visible light, but I've never captured one in visible light. The same place, same everything, cameras pointed up. I can't see them in visible light, but sometimes Lincoln Lounsbury has said he's seen them in visible light. But you have to shoot them in 4K because you can't see them. Even Lincoln can't see them when he's shooting. You can't see them when you shoot. So you have to shoot wide angle. Now, once you're shooting wide angle, you have to be able to zoom in. So if you shoot in 1080p, if you zoom in and post when you're editing it on the computer, you
It's
zoom
not
in.
clear.
It's just crap. I mean, you can't see anything. You have to zoom in a lot. It's not like a little. You have to zoom in a lot, and it's just fuzzy. So you have to shoot in 4K so that when you zoom in, it's clear. That's why the 4K is important
I see.
because
And so
because
would it work at night then? I'm guessing it wouldn't work at night.
we have not been able to see anything at night. Now, it may be that there is some type of camera configuration that could work. For example, if you're shooting through a telescope and you're using the moon as the backdrop, and you can capture it, the UFOs crossing in
Mm.
front of the moon. I've actually seen lots of videos of that. So that is possible. And we actually have a telescope here for that type of thing. But then you're in a situation of having to prove that it was done real. There's a lot of examples of that by amateur astronomers who do this. They literally have video recordings and they're shooting the moon and they watch these things fly in front of the moon. It hasn't made a dent in the community. Even the astronomical professional community just ignores it. There's there's one at the University of Kiev. They have in Ukraine. In between bombing, they have they have a um, uh, the Department
Main
of
astronomical observatory.
yeah, they have an astronomical thing, and those particular astronomers have an interest in this, and they have been
Yeah.
shooting things in space and using their telescopes and stuff like that. And they're picking up the same stuff. They're picking up the same configurations that we have, but they're shooting them out there in space with really powerful telescopes. But other than that, the astronomical community has been dead silent. They're still saying, you know who is one of the biggest crockpots ever in the scientific community? And I really mean this. He was just a scam artist. Carl Sagan.
Carl
Carl
Sagan. Yeah.
Carl Sagan was like worshipped by everybody as being this great astronomer. He wasn't a great astronomer. He was an astronomy popularizer that worked at Cornell. But he was the one who coined the phrase extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, listen, I'm a scientist, I'm a mathematician. I work in a university in a social science program. The whole thing. The issue of science is not, I teach statistics, I teach nonlinear mathematics courses. The issue of being scientific is not new to me. Science has very clear criteria for being science, and it's all statistical. Everything, all physics and everything deals with statistics. And in statistics, they have what's called the alpha level of a test, meaning when you do something and you take measurements, there has to be only a 5% chance of you being wrong, meaning they have to be 95% certain that you're right. That 5% chance is the alpha level. 0.05 is the alpha level. And so that is really, for example, when the CDC was trying to argue that mercury-laden vaccines did not cause autism, I'm not going to get into that debate. I'm just saying when they were trying to say that when thimerosal-laden, the mercury-laden vaccines did not cause autism, they used the alpha level of 0.05. It's sort of standard throughout all of statistics. And that was good enough for them with that very sensitive subject. And there were parents all over the place that were very intense about this, but that was good enough for CDC. For all of science, the alpha level of 0.05 is used. Now, what Carl Sagan did was say, that's not good enough. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So in the psi community, PSI, the psi community, people who study things like remote viewing, telepathy, as well as UFOs and things like that, the alpha level of the test has been surpassed many, many, many magnitudes. So it's not 0.05. They've got it 0.000000, a whole bunch of zeros before you get to another digit, like point 0.3 or something. And it's like so small, and that value is way smaller than the alpha level of the test. So they call it a prob value. That's the probability of having it by mistake, by chance. And the probabilities are like 1 billion to 1 or something. I mean, it's like really small. So what Carl Sagan was trying to do, Carl Sagan did this. He said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What he was saying is, it doesn't matter what prob value you give me. I don't care if it's better than the alpha level of the test. I don't care. I'm not going to believe anything. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Chris, you can't do that in science. You cannot do that in
No.
science. You cannot say, I'm going to move the alpha level of the test to whatever I want arbitrarily to
Uh,
say that your results are meaningless. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And then he got this group of sham artists called psychops. And one of their biggest guys was a magician of all places, of all things. They got them chanting that. That's Committee for the Scientific Investigations of Claims of the Paranormal, chanting, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And they went around, they were debunking people all over the place. And they were very influential in the academic community. And academics are very sensitive. They have PhDs, they want to be respected. So, like the old Rodney Dangerfield comedian guy, he said, I get no respect. I get no respect. Well, academics are like that. They want respect. And then when you get people saying, they're coming in and say, if you talk about this subject, we're going to do you. We're going to
no,
come in and we're going to get you, and we're going to say that you're doing crazy stuff. And we've got Carl Sagan to back us up. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It doesn't matter what evidence you show us. We're not going to believe it, but we're going to come after you. Well, it scared the devil out of the academic community. And so you have, to this day, it's total frozen lockjaw. They can't touch the subject. They won't touch it until it becomes mainstream. And congressional hearings is not enough for them.
so
It's not open public congressional hearings is not enough. I think that's going to happen in 2024. I think, but when you see academics actually coming into it, then you're going to say, okay, it's gotten to the point where this mainstream acceptance, they're only going to come into it when they feel they're not going to lose their job or lose their credibility. They're not going to lose their prestige that they got by, if you got a PhD, there's one thing people want if they have a PhD, they want respect. Like Rodney Dangerfield, they want respect. And so, if you're going to threaten to take that away, they're not going to do it. So when you see academics starting to talk about it openly, that will tell you that they've gotten to a point where they're not fearing losing respect.
it's almost like we need like a celebrity scientist or something to say that they're thinking it's possible, and then all of a sudden that'll break through.
I don't know. Congressional hearings haven't been enough
Not enough. What do you say to
publicized.
people that say you can do anything with statistics? I love this statement as
Well, I
well.
I,
I'm sure
I
you'll
teach
love it.
I teach statistics, so I know that you can fool people with statistics who are not statistically trained.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, if
Exactly.
you can say anything with statistics to somebody who doesn't know statistics, doesn't understand
Yeah.
statistics. I mean, so that is a thing, but um,
Y- Well,
yeah,
can you explain your remote viewing methodology just for people that aren't really
sure,
experienced with it? I know little about it. Can you explain it?
sure. It's very easy. It's a mental thing, and it came out of the U.S. Defense Department. It came out of the U.S. military, and it's been used for espionage purposes. Now, publicly, it was very secret, very classified, and then they came out with their public program. They finally acknowledged that they were doing it, and we had one of our board of directors actually he was one of the top five of five people in two presidential administrations, and he went and talked to some of the people that he knew in the military and the Defense Department. And I don't want to mention names right now, but they were big names that you in the day were very they were public figures that everybody knew. They ran the Defense Department. They were the head of the Defense Department. And he was told point blank that he was one of the top five people in two White Houses. He was told point blank, that remote viewing never lost its credibility within the military. He said they took it serious to the very end, and they still take it seriously. But the issue with remote viewing is it's a mental process, and the military knew it would become public at some point. So they said it's better that we release it and let it become public and stay within the New Age bookstore communities as a peripheral thing rather than to have it become mainstream. So they had a bunch of remote viewers in their program. They let them go and they let them teach it and they let them talk about it with the understanding it would stay on the periphery. It wouldn't get into the mainstream. But then I started to learn. I was a university professor who was really famous for mathematical modeling and stuff like that. And I got interested and I was a star. And I got interested in it and I started to learn it and understand it. And that was new for them. They were not expecting that to happen.
Who was not expecting what to happen?
The
Sorry.
U.S. military. And
Oh, okay.
so initially it caused a bit of a reaction. They wanted to sort of have a shutdown and so on. We had I started our own nonprofit, Farsight Institute, and as well as a for-profit, Farsight, which is does our streaming service. Anyway, initially they attacked us quite heavily and set us up with traps that would cause a sort of a public uproar that would make people think. Typically, if there's a lot of uproar about something, then people stay with their smoke, their fire, and they just walk away and they don't ask any questions. And that's what they really wanted. Um, they were initially trying to get us closed down, but we stopped that. We got some guidance on how to stop that, and we got past that. And then we went sort of hunkered down, and we just started doing scientific experiments. And out of that came my book, Remote Viewing: The Science and Theory of Non-Physical Perception. I came out with a science book on remote viewing. Remote Viewing: The Science and Theory of Non-Physical Perception. That went into the science of why it is possible, of how it works. Oh, by the way, and then we developed our own procedures that are way more advanced than the original military procedures, and much more targeted. You get much deeper information, and we focused a lot on methods that will allow the telepathy skills to go as well. Now, remote viewing technically is a way to see mental images of places, people, things across time and space, past, present, future, any distance works. It could be on the other side of the planet, and that's what the military was really interested in. You'd be an idiot to say that the military is not using remote viewing now. They're not going to publicize it. The black budget stuff in the military is way bigger than the visible stuff. The stuff that's been coming out in the news over the last week is that they don't know like 40 to 60% of the entire military budget where it goes. Well, so they're not going to publicize this stuff. They're still using it and investigating it, but they're not letting it go public. The early part of the program, they let it go public, and then they said, "Don't worry, we're not going to do that again." Well, if you believe that, that's you're nuts. Anyway,
Mm.
so but basically, what it is let me give you an idea. This is a pen, a big pen. Okay. Now, when you're looking at this pen, is really bright. Now, what's happening is the light from the pen reflected on the pen is entering your eyes and going into the eyeballs and going through the pathways in the brain to get to the brain. And it's like the image is being projected onto a set of cells in the brain. Actually, the neurologists actually have determined that that's exactly what's happening. The certain cells are lighting up with regard to that image. Now, this was the pen, but now bring the pen back in your mind of what that pen was. It's the remembered image of what that pen looked like. Now look at that pen. Notice it's a little translucent, a little fuzzy, a little translucent. It's not as clear as the ocular image. It's a little bit fuzzy or foggier, but also a little bit translucent. Well, the remote viewing image is worse than that. It's foggier, fuzzier, and it's more translucent. Normally, you ignore those things. You just ignore all these images that come in through these intuitive perceptions, and you focus on things that are either remembered or that you see with your actual eyeballs. The remote viewers are trained not to ignore those things, to focus on those remote viewing perceptions. Basically, remote viewing works because we are what we call composite beings. We don't use the word soul or spirit because of all the religious baggage that comes with it. We use the word Isbe, Isbe. And Isbe, we are all Isbes. And Isbe is a person who exists just for the purpose of being. And what that Isbe is, every Isbe inhabits and animates the physical body. This physical body, yours, mine, everybody's, is just a machine, a biological electrochemical machine. It eventually dies, it goes away, it has no reference to you. It's just a thing you're animating. In our circles and human circles, we actually think of this as us, like this is the real us. It's not the real us.
Mm.
Extraterrestrials have a very clear understanding of the composite nature of life, so that there's an ISB part and then a physical part. And they don't take the physical part very seriously. They know to operate in this universe and this reality that we're here, the 3D reality, you have to have a physical body, but they pull people in and out of those bodies. They themselves, if the body just is malfunctions, they get another one. But for us humans, it's a big thing that we have to art. Yeah, you question: does a soul exist? Crazy! You are the soul. You are the Isbe. So basically, Isbes. We have found that they exist as, and they exist through all of space and time. There's no limitation to an Isbe, and it is impossible, absolutely impossible. I'm giving you the short version now.
Mm.
It's impossible to kill an Isbe. Nobody, no matter what some religion person tells you, nobody can grant you eternal life because you already have it. It's impossible to kill an Isbe. Now, you can trap an Isbe, you can enslave an Isbe, you can trick an Isbe, you can lie to an Isbe, you can do all types of bad things to an Isbe, but you can't kill it. So, what happens is when you're seeing these things, you're seeing them with your Isbe part. But the brain is an electrochemical computer. It's a physical device. So it only sees things easily that come into the five physical senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Those things are what the brain is used to. It's all wired up to get those five physical senses. But the ISB senses, it does get those, but it's harder. Now, a good evidence of this, you actually experience it every day. When you sleep, you dream. When you dream, the ISB part disconnects from the body and actually does stuff, and that's what dreams are. They're not like stories that you imagine came from Disney. They are things that you actually do when the body shuts down. But when you wake up, it's hard to remember the dreams because the dreams were not registered in the electrochemical physical memory parts of the brain. So your ISB part was doing that, but then when you're coming back in, there's no memory of it because it's not written on the hard drive of the computer brain, the physical stuff. So you can't remember it because you're starting to rely on the physical computational machinery of the brain. But one of the ways around that is when you're sleeping and you wake up to go to the bathroom or whatever, and there's a dream. If you have a pad of paper and a pen right next to your bed, before you do anything, if you wait until you go to the bathroom and come back, you're probably going to forget the dream. But if you can just write it down as soon as you open your eyes, before you go, just write it down. You probably won't remember it when you wake up in the morning, and you'll probably be surprised to see writing on the pad. You'll say, "I wrote that? I don't remember writing on that." But
Mm.
that's pretty much the only way you can get when the body and the ISB is sort of half in and half out. That's really the only way you can really sort of remember these things because it's not registered. For example, what if it was a computer and you have something that's working in the computer, like a file, but not like a program or something. But the thing, the program, the image, or whatever, it's not saved to the hard drive. You turn off the computer and you turn it back on, or it's gone. If it's not saved to the hard drive, if it's not saved to the SSD drive or whatever, it's gone. It's gone. It's gone. You just don't get it back because it wasn't written to the physical memory of the computer. That's what it's like with the brain. And so what happens is what the remote viewers are really trained at, and they train like for a year to be good at that, is while they're fully awake, they're trained to perceive these things and to write them down. That's what the remote viewing is. That's why our procedures are much more complicated and they're much better than the early original military procedures because they're much more targeted and focused on different things that we want the remote viewers to look at when they're actually accessing a target. And they're really good. I mean, they're really, really, really good at this stuff. And then we not only train them how to do it, but how to present it. So they're mostly young people. So and they're really great. It's what they do full time. That's how they pay their rent. That's their job.
Wow.
So if you do this as a hobby, it's sort of hard. But if you do it as a full time thing that you're good at, this is your profession, you get better at it. For example, I was a weekend pilot. I was not a very good pilot. You were a professional pilot that flew every day. If you're looking at skills for flying, comparing me to you, it's no comparison. You were great. I was crappy.
Proficiency.
Pardon me?
Yeah, just keeping up proficiency. What's you know when you say these people do it full time? Honestly, I didn't even know that's a real job. What
Yeah,
can you
they get.
describe like how it would work? If you had who are the customers? What are they paying, and what's I guess the most memorable viewer you saw, or I don't even know what to
All
call it. Yeah.
our remote viewers are all equal quality. They're really good, but they have their own specialties. Um, they get paid a regular salary, not a salary, but they work as independent contractors, but they get paid regular money and they own houses. They pay their mortgage and they own cars and things like that. I mean,
Oh,
just the same as anybody else as
yeah.
professionals. And the reason we do that is because we have our streaming service. So our streaming service has a regular monthly fee of $10 a month, and we have many customers who actually are interested in this subject, and that money goes to support them as well as to buy machinery. I mean, just for example, well, it's not they're not on right now, but I can at least show you. Uh, these are these are computers and everything that I have of all different types all over the place. I mean, this is not a a thing where we're an actually remote viewing film company. So we are not a company that is cheap on the level of devices. I mean, you were asking me about the pictures, and I said, yeah, we use Panasonic Lumix GH6s. You wouldn't see those pictures if we use cheap cameras, or if we use cameras that could shoot only 30 frames a second. So we invest in whatever's the best available to do what needs to be done. And so we have our own studio. We have to pay a rent on that studio. We've got a green screen in the studio, a good green screen. The remote viewers often do their work on Lightboard when presenting, and that's a $6,000 piece of optical glass. Optical glass is different from regular glass. If you look at regular glass from the side, it's green. Optical glass, if you look at it from the side, it's clear. That's what glasses are made from, optical glass. Well, this is a $6,000 piece of optical glass. It's huge. And what the remote viewers do is they train to be able to draw with markers on this optical glass. What the optical glass is it has light around the edges of the optical glass, and it shines in the light into the glass. But the light cannot escape from the glass unless there's a marker that draws on it. So here you have these people with a black background, black cat suits, drawing on this glass. It looks like they're drawing on space, like they're like all I see is a disembodied face and hands and drawing in front of it. It looks like right out of the Twilight Zone, but it's very entertaining. But they do it solo. I mean, and they're trained to be able to do that and to make it entertaining. If you watch people do remote viewing on a piece of paper and a pen, watching the grass grow is way more interesting. But if you do it on a light board, it looks like you're in Star Trek. It looks really great. Plus, we have interview formats and a nice where we sometimes talk about the sessions with like sort of Joe Rogan style, like what we're doing right now, two people talking. Um, and our audience really likes the fact that we present this stuff in an entertaining way. Some of our projects are short, um, like the deep news projects go from 15 to 30 minutes, but many of our projects, most of our projects are like 2 hours. Some go to 3 hours. It's not uncommon. We have never, ever, never, for many years, we've never had a single complaint that someone's at our projects for too long. People are at the edge of their seat watching it because you're watching the remote viewer describe something totally blind, but you know as the audience what the project is because you know what the movie is that you're actually watching. You know what the remote viewer is describing, and you know that the remote viewer does not know when they're describing it, and they're describing it exactly correct. And it's like you're going, holy blankety blank, are you serious? And so that's how good these remote viewers are to be able to do this and to be able to do it in a theatrically interesting way. And we train them to be able to do that. So it's not just that they know how to do the remote viewing, but they know how to do it with the presentation as well and with the proper equipment. So that's what the money goes to. At the end of every month, we're broke. We don't, oh, by the way, I don't get any money from Farsight. I'm the only one that doesn't get anything. So, I may own Farsight, the streaming service, but I don't. I'm a professor at a university. I don't need the money for. I have another source of income, so I don't need that. But the remote viewers, for them to do this full time, they need to be able to do this. If you have another job, let's say you're flipping burgers at McDonald's or you're working at a cashier at Walmart's or whatever, you're exhausted at the end of the day. You don't have the energy to do this,
So,
and to do the sessions and then to do the stuff on video. And we precede all of our stuff with meditation, like an hour of meditation. You don't have time for any of that stuff if you're working 9 to 5 or more. If you're a bus driver or whatever, you're exhausted at the end of the day. You don't. So the only way this could be done is if we had professional viewers who did this as a job, and it works. They
and
go
I've
across.
seen before, you've actually had remote viewings of extraterrestrial locations, other planets, insane stuff. So based on all this work, have you developed any new theories or hypotheses about the nature of the phenomenon or about remote
Yes.
viewing? Yeah,
Yes, we know the whole thing now,
you
and
do. Okay.
what
Wow.
we're trying to do is convince the rest of the world that what we are doing, that what we have discovered is in fact correct.